So welcome everyone to the Community Design Advisory Committee. This is a special meeting rescheduled from about a week ago. Let's start by introducing folks that are on the call. You don't have to obviously go into your full resume, just your name and your role in the committee. I think that should be fine. So Councillor Austin, can you start off?
I could if the sleeve on my on my laptop was actually open there. Yeah, Councillor Austin. I'm the councillor for Dartmouth Centre, and that's who I am, and that's how I have come to be here.
Okay, Councillor Mason. I'm not sure if you're on the call. I don't see the name. And Councillor Smith, I don't see. Councillor Morris, yeah, there you are.
Good morning, everybody. I represent District 10, which is Fairview, Clayton Park, and Rockingham. And I'm very interested in this package and how it relates to future suburban plans.
Councillor Cuddle.
Good morning, everyone. Patty Cuddle reporting from District 11, Spryfield, Sambro Loop, and Prospect Road communities. And yeah, very excited for this discussion today. Thanks.
Councillor Stoddard, I don't see that name here. Member William Book isn't here. Eric Birchall, could you introduce yourself?
Good day all, it's Eric Birchall here.
Eric?
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, just introduce yourself there.
Oh, good morning all. Pleased to be here for the meeting. Eric Birchall, one of the community members of the committee.
Sorry, I have one of the absent members calling me. Hang on.
Would it be helpful if the rest of us introduce ourselves while we wait for the chair to
That
finish?
sounds like a great idea. Is there Chris Daly on the call?
Hi, Chris Daly. Really excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. And Dale Godso? Nope. Reg Manzer?
Hi, I'm Reg. I'm one of the community members and I currently reside in Mr. Cleary's area. So excited to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you. Meredith Baldwin, are you on our call today? Nope. Gaynor Watson Creed?
Yeah, not there, not here today. Sorry about that. That was Dale trying to log on, and I think she's having trouble with the log on process. Could one of the staff members get a hold of her by phone or by email and help her out?
Hello, Chair. Yes, we will.
And anyone else we missed?
I don't think so.
Hi,
Chair.
Fred.
Just
It's
yourself.
Gaynor. I just got here.
There's Gaynor. Introduce yourself, Gaynor.
Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you all. Gaynor Watson Creed. I think I'm still vice chair of the committee.
And I'm Fred Morley, and I'm chair. So let's move on with the agenda. Could we have someone move approval of the minutes for March 2nd? Was our last meeting. Anyone? Chris? Second, Gaynor? All those in favor? Wave your hands. Those opposed, wave your hands. Minutes are passed. Let's skip to call for, next is the approval of the order of business. Any additions or deletions to the order of business from anyone? Could I have someone move?
I'll move that.
Hey, Patty, second. Chris, all those in favor? Waving. Those opposed? Order of business is passed. The no business arising. Any conflicts of interest that anyone wants to declare? Hearing none. No deferred business. There's been lots and lots of correspondence, and hopefully everyone's had a chance to peruse it. A lot of the correspondence has certainly been, or all of the correspondence has been addressed in to some degree in the package that we received, addressed by staff. So we have no correspondence, no petitions, nothing from the clerk on that. No. And so no information items. So let's move right into the presentation on the center plan. I guess that's what we're here for. So Ben, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Very pleased to be here to start the kind of final review of the package, the center plan package review process. It's been a long process for the community, and very much appreciate the community's work. I'm just going to share my screen, which seemed to work fine just a minute ago. And yeah, before I jump in and give an overview, just first want to acknowledge, first of all, the committee's hard work and guiding the process to the state. I know it's been a long haul for many committee members, and the process has gone on longer, especially due to COVID than people were expecting. So very much appreciate our hard work and guidance from this committee, and also want to acknowledge all the staff work involved to get to this point. I'm fortunate to be here, presenting and giving an overview of the package, but it's a whole large team of staff that pulled this package together. I was actually going to start to name a few key staff, but quickly realized that the length was too long to cover. But quickly acknowledge the center plan team, of course, that really has really put the package together. But also, all of P&D really planning and development has contributed in some way. Particularly GIS mapping support, the heritage team, current planning, and other key reviewers in the municipality and supporting departments, particularly legal staff, parks and recreation, and the integrated mobility team as well. So I'll stop with the acknowledgements there and move on with the overview. If it will advance. There it is. So here on screen is the outline for today, and we recognize that it's a very big report package that was just sent out to committee members just a few days ago. It's the whole plan and bylaw and staff report with a lot of explanation. So I have a fairly detailed presentation to go over. I think it should take about 40 minutes. This being the first committee seeing this and the key committee that's been guiding the center plan process. I'll spend a bit of time talking about the center plan context and planning process, reflecting on the years of work to bring us to this date. I will touch on package A, which is a previous process, and really highlight some of the key updates through package B. Spend most of the time on package B overview of what are the key designations and new zones proposed and some of the key updates compared to previous drafts, and quickly touch on governance, the repeal amendments to the existing planning documents that the center plan regional center documents are intended to replace, the remaining community and council review process, and of course ending with the recommendations that which will lead to community discussions about what this committee might want to recommend to the Community Planning Economic Development Standing Committee. So first, just to put the center plan in context, its committee members are aware it's part of a larger secondary plan and bylaw simplification process. And to be frank, for a variety of reasons, the Halifax Regional Municipality has an overly complex and outdated planning framework, specifically when it comes down to what we call the secondary planning strategy level, which dives into the detailed zoning and development agreement policies. It's quite a patchwork, and some of them some of the plans are fairly old and just inconsistent and not necessarily aligned with the good work, the good policy direction in the regional plan review. So a few years ago, this program was launched to consolidate, to streamline the approval process, respond to current planning challenges, and for good reason. The first phase is a center plan because for the regional center, because it contains some of the most updated plans and is the part of the municipality that it's targeted for a lot of growth in the coming years. This is an overview. I'm sure many community members already know this, but the regional center context, why it's a focus for first phase of the bylaw simplification process. While it's a really relatively small land area in terms of all of HRM, it contains about 25% of the population, and of course is also a major political, economic, and cultural center. It contains many of the major institutions and facilities in the municipality. Up until recently, it also contains some of the lowest vacancy rates. The COVID-19 pandemic has turned things on its head a little bit, but it still remains fairly tight and a lot of interest in new housing in this part of the municipality. As a reminder that the regional plan and integrated mobility plan targets a significant growth in the regional center because of the efficiencies with adding new housing to areas that already have good access to transit and services and other amenities. And over the past couple of years, the regional center has been assessing about 23% of the housing starts. It fluctuates from year to year, so we're not quite, in the last couple of years, hasn't been quite reaching that regional plan targets, but past years has actually gone higher. Just to put it in context, and in terms of absolute value, this is talking about over $270 million of construction value in 2020. So, without going into too much detail about the center plan process to date, I think the discussions and the concept of the center plan actually dates back further than what I have on the slide. But really, the center plan, I think, as you know, it really started in earnest in September of 2015 with the launching of a number of background studies and community engagements. It really started off with that broad visioning exercises that many planning processes start with. From there, it moved into development of a guiding planning framework, which we are known as the purple document, which was kind of a precursor to the plan, which set out the guiding directions about densities and where growth is allocated. The council directive, which continues to guide package B today. From there, because the plan was so large and dealt with such a broad area, so many topics, it was split into two. The first phase being package A, which dealt with the high growth areas, where the largest buildings and the highest density buildings are targeted for, and that was approved by council in September 2019. So that's guiding current development permits today. Package B is a process we're focusing on now, which is intended to cover all the remaining areas of the regional center, resulting in one comprehensive plan. So it's not like we're going to be a package A and a package B plan. At the conclusion of the package B process, it will result in one comprehensive plan for the regional center. And just a reminder, I know we're focusing on package B and kind of consultations that took place over the past year, but some of the feedback and broad-based feedback we got from earlier phases of the project, the visioning that's incorporated into the purple document it still remains relevant. And just to highlight that a lot of past consultations are continuing to be guide the planning policies today and continue to be a resource for this committee and other deliberations. For package B, like many projects in the municipality or really around the world, the planning process for this, the engagement process is very much interrupted by the COVID-19 state of emergency. Just before the start of that in March of last year, we were able to complete 10 pop-ups and 12 stakeholder sessions, or actually provided a lot of good feedback. But the 8 public meetings that were planned had to be canceled at the time. We just couldn't meet in person anymore for of course, good reason. From there, working with CDAC, we pivoted to more of an online and virtual format using a variety of different tools, including restarting CDAC meetings in their virtual format, social media and correspondence. We received a lot of correspondence by email and of course talked to people on the phone. We launched a number of surveys that provided different feedback in different parts of the package B plan, held visual stakeholder meetings as requested and as we could. And with the remaining part of the engagement process focused on the established residential areas and also the St. Patrick's Alexandra site. And just a reminder, it was just in March 2nd, a couple of months ago, where we presented the What We Heard report, which summarizes all the package B engagement process, the feedback that we received, some of the key themes of this feedback, as well as the detailed survey summaries, and including the focus consultations on the St. Patrick's Alexandra site, and of course contained all the correspondence and site-specific requests. So again, this is another resource for this committee to look back to as you're considering your recommendations. Okay, so that's a brief overview of the process. To just get us all on the same page of where we are. It has been, I said, has been a number of steps to get us to where we are today. So I'm going to switch gears at this point and switched over to a package A overview of what was already approved and what is package B, what are the proposed changes in package B. So, first of all, most importantly, package A established the core concept for the regional center planning. So that was contained in package B, and of course is carried forward with package B and was intended to apply to the whole regional center. So these core concepts include complete communities. So that's being having access to services, open spaces, within walking distance, human scale design, pedestrian first, particularly when you're thinking about the transportation network, and also strategic growth, so directing growth to the right places. Package A also focused on the high growth areas and established the designations and zones for these areas, including downtown Dartmouth and centers, which are the kind of most densest and highest intensity areas, which allow for high-rise buildings and a variety of commercial uses. The corridor zones, which is applied along major transit routes that are intended to accommodate more mid-rise buildings and also a mix of either commercial or residential uses. The higher order residential designation and associated zones that are more geared to multi-unit residential developments, and future growth nodes, which are intended to guide master neighborhood planning, applied to areas like Shannon Park and some of the existing shopping malls to facilitate the future redevelopment into kind of mixed-use communities. For the next slides, I'm not going to go into these designations and zoning details because they were the focus of package A, but I will go over the more regional, the plan area wide policies, because they do both apply to package A and package B areas, and I'll highlight some of the key updates that we're proposing with package B. So first, package A established I think more comprehensively than any other, the plans in the municipality, a lot of good guidance around urban design, about the look of buildings and how they relate to the surrounding area. So it's through package A that the council established controls around floor area ratios, so controlling density by floor area instead of height in some areas. That's particularly for the center, and also a maximum building height framework that takes into account the existing neighborhood character. That includes transition to low-rise neighborhoods, protected views like view planes, protections for wind and shadow, so different protocols to ensure that parks aren't shadowed by new buildings, establish requirements for pedestrian-oriented commercial streets. So these are the streets like Queenpool Road, where we do want to see commercial and active street front, and also a number of different site and landscaping design requirements. Package A also established cultural and heritage policies, which continue to be carried forward in Package B. These identified a number of landscapes of cultural significance to be considered as part of the planning process and future amendments. It reduces heights and FAR for registered heritage properties, proposed in heritage conservation districts to enable those processes to catch up and kind of prevent premature development of those areas before, or discourage premature development before those heritage processes can proceed. It includes a development agreement option for registered heritage properties to incentivize heritage properties and to provide more flexibility. And this is carried forward in Package B and refined based on the experience over the past year of administering it. Includes incentive and bonus zoning for heritage conservation and affordable cultural and community indoor space. So again, incentivizing heritage preservation. And it also includes heritage design requirements for registered heritage buildings and abutting properties that work with the Heritage Property Act. Package A also established the direction related to housing. A key part of that is ensuring that increased development opportunities for new development in areas are served by transit. So just directing increased housing opportunities for new housing developments in the right places is part of the strategy for addressing housing needs. It also includes a mix of unit types required in high density developments. Package B carries it forward and makes some minor refinements based on stakeholder feedback. It also accommodates different types of housing options. So this includes shared housing, work loop units, home offices, secondary suites, and backyard suites. And these also, of course, apply to the Package B areas. Through the bonus zoning framework, it requires a majority, about 60% of the bonus zoning requirements to be targeted to affordable housing as money in lieu. And I think we'll be seeing in the coming months and years how this will help support affordable housing developments in the regional center, and also provide support for partnerships with other municipal initiatives and to address supporting housing needs. In terms of support for economic development, having an updated plan helps to provide regulatory certainty, and also with the approach to zoning, it provides for a more streamlined review process, so it can get development projects to the construction phase sooner than past plans. It provides a wide range of large and small scale development opportunities throughout the regional center, so not just large, but also the small and some of the medium scale in between. There is support for commercial development districts. So this is for more of a taxation tool that the charter enables to enable assessment increases to be phased in over time. So that's supported in the regional center, and I understand that's going to be planned to be broadened through the regional plan review to all of the municipality. Just note that urban design and heritage protection support tourism. It's one of the reasons why people visit Halifax or visit any city, as kind of the nature, the character, and the buildings located in the city. There is policy support for enclaves of innovation, incentives, and partnerships, particularly with university and colleges and other institutions. And also a focus on livable communities is also a way of attracting investment and talent to the region. Mobility considerations is a big part of the center plan process. With the biggest coordination, I guess the most important part of it is ensuring that the growth is focused near current and proposed high frequency transit routes. So just directing new higher density developments to areas close to transit helps to support those investments in transit, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and provides a number of other benefits. There is support for traditional street grid and pedestrian connections. So that's part of making pedestrians first in a walkable city, is to make sure it's easy to get around through a tight-knit street grid. Package A introduced reduced parking requirements. So sometimes no minimum parking requirements, and in some cases actually maximum parking requirements. There are also expanded accessibility provisions. So the building code generally deals with a lot of accessibility needs, and Package A introduced requirements related to walkways through parking areas and other accessibility site design features, and also established transportation reserve zone in key areas to support the new roads and mobility investments. I'll have a quick drink of water. In terms of the environment, the Package A introduced support for region-wide environmental protection measures. So a lot of the environmental protection measures are actually originate in the regional plan and have been implemented in all the plans. So that includes wetland protections and watercourse setbacks. The urban forest master plan is already in place, and also requirements around setbacks to the marine coast. So the central plan carries that forward. There is support for district energy systems and will impact development approaches particularly through the future growth node master planning exercises. There is consistent with the regional plan. There are also vertical coastal setbacks, and through Package B, we're proposing to also apply them to institutional and commercial uses with some special flexibility for waterfront special areas, recognizing their importance to downtown development. Landscaping requirements, also with rooftop landscaping requirements, in particular, also on another environmental benefit, height exemptions for rooftop solar panels so that there's no regulatory barriers to putting solar panels on existing buildings that already might be at the maximum height, and also support for urban agriculture. And lastly, Package A also established some of the key implementation tools that are, of course, continue to be applied to Package B areas. That includes development permits, so the as-of-right process, the site plan approval tool, discretionary approval, so this is rezonings and development agreements and the criteria needed to consider when proposals come in. The whole incentive and bonus zoning framework with the 5 different public benefit categories. There are provisions for relaxation on non-conforming uses and structures so that existing buildings and uses have a reasonable amount of flexibility to continue to operate and expand. Also direction to related municipal investments that supports directions and the policy directions in this plan, and also transition provisions to ensure a smooth transition between old and new plans for active development applications. So some of the key updates proposed to Package A through the Package B process that are outlined in the staff report in detail, and I'll cover the main highlights here. I think one of the most significant ones is the proposed streamlined use of the site plan approval tool, so that it's instead of it being applied in all cases for requirements that are actually fairly prescriptive in nature, that we're finding creates challenges in terms of just how much influence the public and different communities can influence, and focusing the site plan approval tool more on the variations where there is opportunities for meaningful conversations about design choices. So overall, kind of a streamlined approach that we think would make sense to apply region-wide and takes into consideration various the resourcing of the tool and the best use of that tool. So I can touch on that more if there's any questions about that. There's also minor changes to the built form and building design requirements, mostly just to clarify and to streamline some of the requirements that we've gotten feedback from stakeholders about through now that we've had a year and a half or so to implement the approved Package A. There are a few additional package A zone land, so a new proposed future growth node, the Southdale future growth node, for example, and a few other minor additions to the centers and corridor zones that again highlighted in the staff report. There is a proposed Roby Street Transportation Reserve. So the Transportation Reserve was applied related to the Cogswell redevelopment and also Dartmouth Cove, and to support the bus rapid transit network. We're proposing to apply it along Roby Street to allow for future road widening. Specific mapping on this may be refined in response to expected council direction. I just wanted to highlight this for the committee. There's also some refinement to front and flankage setbacks to reflect existing building setbacks to support and to support landscaping. Something I'll touch on a little bit more detail in the next slide is also proposed site-specific policies for the St. Patrick Alexander site, a site-specific development agreement policies that provide more tailored development options for that site. Also want to note that in response to issues with implementing the Spring Garden Road and Roby Street development agreement policies, both timelines and also kind of prescriptive nature of the previously approved council policies. Package B is proposing to pull this into the regional center plan to make some small adjustments and to enable, I guess, to remove some of the timeline pressures on that large scale and important project. And also some minor updates to implementation policy updates, primarily to clarify when rezoning proposals can be considered, and also, as I mentioned, the revised approach to the site plan approval tool. So touch on the St. Patrick Alexander site a little bit detailed because it was such a focus of the package B consultations and the targeted focus on the Northern Halifax community. So as committee members may know, the site is currently zone HR1 with a 14 meter height limit, and the proposed draft continues to carry forward this as an option that the site can still be developed as a right under that zoning. However, the proposed plan does introduce a site-specific development agreement policy that is intended to replace the large lot and registered heritage development agreement policy that would otherwise apply to the site. So it's intended to provide some clarity about what can happen on the site and to tailor that's development agreement options to the good feedback received from the community through the package B process. So this includes allowing for a maximum of 23 meters in height for 25% of the site, so up to 7 to 8 stories, but for only part of the site. Allowing for additional commercial uses, so grocery stores and fitness centers, which was something that was seen as desirable by the community. It does have some consideration for the preservation of the Andrew Cobb building facade on Bungick Street in the initial phases. The policy doesn't go as far as requiring it to be registered as a heritage property, but does require at least a facade to be maintained. There are considerations for commemorations of school and the local community, outdoor amenity space, and also tailoring of the bonus zoning to be only accepted for on-site heritage preservation and money for affordable housing instead of the full 5 categories. Again, and based on the good community feedback we received through the consultation processes. Okay, that's package A, and I'm now going to switch gears and talk about package B, or really focusing on the new designations and zones that are being introduced to this package, and also highlighting some of the key changes compared to previous drafts. So first, a very important designation that was a key part of introducing more density and housing to the regional center is the support for parks and community facilities, which are of course part of the complete communities. So this designation is applied to parks and open spaces and public schools and community facilities located in a kind of open space type setting. It's intended to protect and support a connected public park and open space network. This designation establishes 2 zones: the regional park zone, which is applied to the lands identified in the regional plan, so Point Pleasant Park and Citadel, for example, and also the park and community facility zone, which is applied to all other public parks and community facilities located in a predominantly park and open space setting. And and a continuation from package B is also some refined direction to develop a regional center open space plan to support future investments in the parks and parks facilities in the regional center. The downtown designation is also one that is expanded through package B. So package A applied it to downtown Dartmouth, and through package B, it's also applied to downtown Halifax. And it's intended to support the development in the core, where the largest scale and most intense uses are of course to be encouraged. So the downtown designation is applied, establishes one zone for downtown Halifax, the D8 zone, and 8 special areas to tailor the unique urban design requirements. I will highlight that the 2009 downtown plan will still continue to apply to the Barrington Street and Old South Suburb Heritage Conservation Districts because the nature of the different provincial legislations, they couldn't be all completed through this one process. So through the downtown Halifax HCD process that I understand is underway, that will be those will be folded in to the central plan framework within the coming year or so. There's also policy direction to develop detailed policies for the Cogswell area and following the completion of the master infrastructure plan. So the package B does apply to that Cogswell area, but until the subdivision process is complete and the roads are turned into parcels instead of road parcels, there will be a follow-up process to consult the community and to establish height frameworks and other urban design controls specifically for those lands, and that we anticipate planning to initiate that process just after package B is approved. And I'll also highlight some increased flexibility for waterfront special areas, a lot based on the Develop Nova Scotia's feedback primarily to provide a bit more flexibility for harbor related uses and also things like kiosks in the waterfront area. The established residential designation is arguably the bread and butter of the package B process. It's the part of the package that's generated the most public interest, and I think we looked at it, covers about 1/3 of the regional center. And this designation is applied to predominantly low-rise residential areas, so low-density areas, and it's intended to retain the scale of the low-density residential neighborhoods while providing opportunities for more housing options. So, in addition to single-unit dwellings, also other forms of low-density housing areas to accommodate changing demographics and interest in living in the regional center. So the designation permits secondary suites, backyard suites, shared housing, home occupations, and daycare uses. Refining some of the existing permissions and controls that are in place now. A key change from the previous draft is to allow local commercial institution uses to be considered only by development agreement. The previous draft, as committee may remember, was proposed to allow this as a right. We recognize that doesn't necessarily capture the nuances in the community, and also that doesn't control for hours of operation. So that's where the development agreement tool comes in, that it can control for hours of operations and can put some tailored controls in place, and also community consultations. And the designation establishes 4 zones: the established residential 1, which has been revised to be 1 single unit dwellings plus accessory suites. Established residential 2, which is 2 main dwelling units plus accessory suites. This includes semis and 2-unit dwellings. And established residential 3, which has been revised to be 3-unit dwellings plus accessory suites, as well as, and continues to allow townhouses as well. It also establishes a cluster housing zone, which is a little bit of a change from the previous draft. It replaces the land lease community zone. So it still allows for mobile home parks and is applied to those areas, but also creates more flexibility to allow for the potential clustering of low density housing on the same lot, and is applied to a limited number of other lots in the regional center. And to tailor some of the controls to the different subdivisions and when the neighborhoods are when neighborhoods were developed, the designation establishes 5 precincts and 10 special areas to tailor things like lot coverage and setbacks to to preserve kind of the main character of various neighborhoods. heritage preservation is a key part of the established resident designation, so it's to highlight a few heritage components. That the Schmidtville HCD is incorporated into the central plan framework and applied a HCD-CV zone to capture all the kind of unique aspects of that HCD. And following council direction to consider additional heritage conservation districts, HCDs, in the south end of Halifax, 3 new proposed HCDs are proposed. That's Oakland Road, Fort Massey, and Yonge Avenue. So those are reflected in the proposed plan as well. And to support appropriate scale developments, the max height of 8 meters applied to registered heritage properties, and the ER1 zone applied over proposed HCDs and ER designations with flexibilities for existing uses. So some of the key changes from the previous draft that I think we've talked about at this committee, and there might be a topic of conversation going forward, is I think the zone placements and the unit counts associated with them are intentionally revised to more closely align with existing zoning. So in areas that do allow already for 2 units, we're proposing to carry that forward. The cluster housing zone, as I mentioned, is a revision from the land use community zone contained in the previous draft. The placement of the ER zone has been refined to focus more only on major transit corridors, and also applied to where townhouses are currently permitted, so that no landowners are so that the possibility isn't removed for some landowners. And it also introduced some minor townhouse design requirements. As I mentioned, the development agreement policy for local commercial and institution uses instead of an as a right permissions that were contained in the previous draft. This draft does not include a broad-based 3-unit conversion special area policy or in the land use bylaw, with the reasoning being that the accessory backyard suite really covers the same intent, but is in a more flexible way. I also note revisions to updates to the Yonge Avenue special area, which continue to carry forward unique lot and setback requirements. 3-unit, this is I guess the one area where 3-unit conversions to existing homes are continue to apply because of to support the maintenance of the existing large homes in the area, and also allows for dwellings containing up to 4 units to be redeveloped as a right to be developed as a right, provided the lots are subdivided into large lots, and with design requirements made to ensure it resemble one large single unit dwelling. So this is a change from the previous development agreement policies, which allowed for narrower lots and also added process. The revised approach uses the as a right process, and also more closely aligns with the existing lot and design requirements in the area. And I'll also highlight that there is also increased flexibility for non-conforming residential uses in the ER designation. So this includes the ability to rebuild if should, heaven forbid, a building be destroyed by fire, and also flexibility to expand existing uses provided it meets zone requirements. The institutional employment designation is a big part of the regional center. It's where we have some of our major institutional uses. Department of National Defense, the hospitals, major universities are all located in the regional center. It's applied to those as well as small scale institutions like libraries and community centers, and is intended to support the expansion of the many thriving institutions located in the regional center. The designation establishes 5 zones: the institutional zone, INF zone, which is applied to more of the small scale institutional uses like libraries. 2 university and college zones, and this is a change from the previous draft where we only had 1 zone. And this is to reflect kind of different urban design needs and requirements of 2 types of campuses. The UC1 zone is applied to more of the campus open space type campuses like the main Dal or a St. Mary's University campus, whereas UC2 zone is more of an urban setting that pulls more from the downtown Halifax design requirements, and is applied to the Carleton campus and also a portion of Sexton where it is more of a urban type feel to those campuses. There's also specific zones for the hospitals and also the Department of National Defense, with limited controls and understanding that the province and federal governments don't usually obtain permits from the municipality when they undertake development on their lands. A couple additional highlights for the institutional employment designation include support for adaptive reuse of certain landmark buildings. So certain places of worship, for example, are identified and provided as a right flexibility to redevelop, provided the buildings are substantially maintained. And also there's support for potential expansion of reuse through land use bylaw amendment process. So for example, if Dalhousie University were to acquire more lands and want to expand the university and college zone, that could be considered through a rezoning process instead of having to open up the whole plan through the plan amendment process. The industrial employment designation is, of course, also a key feature of the regional center, with especially along the harbor, and it's applied to the existing industrial and mixed-use industrial areas and commercial areas, and it's intended to support industrial, limited commercial, and harbor-related industries. The designation establishes three zones: the light industrial zone, the harbor-related industrial zone, which is applied along the harbor, and the commercial light industrial zone. And it's this last zone that was being revised from the previous draft to not just focus on commercial uses, but also provide for more of a mix of industrial and complementary commercial uses. And it's applied to areas like Kemp Road and Windmill Road that already have that mix of uses. There's also support for mixed industrial and commercial special areas applied to the Seaport Market, and through this last draft also applied to the Cove area in Dartmouth to support kind of provide more flexibility for those particular areas. There are policies related to the Halifax Green Elevator Area Assessment and Development Agreement policies to manage the residential development in the short term while we work with the Port Authority to better assess the potential safety issues with the proximity to residential uses in the area, and also additional opportunities for research and development facility uses. So it's a new R&D use is established and allowed in the centers and downtown zones to allow some of the more more high-tech type manufacturing that is often now finding its way into commercial areas. Things like 3D printing and development of prototypes is the intent of this additional land use. And the last designation I'll highlight is the water access designation, which is applied to the pre-Confederation water lots located on Lake Pinook and Lake Mi'kmaq and along the Northwest Arm, and it's intended to protect the unique character and environment of waterfront areas. The designation recognizes that these pre-Confederation lots can be infilled if approval is granted by the federal government or by the provincial government depending on where it's located. In short, we can't prevent the infilling of water lots, but we can control what's used on the land after it is infilled. It establishes one zone and 4 special areas to guide development, and generally limits permitted uses to parks, water access structures, boat clubs only in certain special areas, and also public infrastructure and accessory uses. So it generally de-incentivizes or discourages infilling because the land can't be used for a lot of residential development, for example. I will also touch on the COVID-19 considerations. I think get questions about how does package A and package B, how does this plan respond to our course, well, not just Nova Scotia, but the global context has certainly changed in the past year. And some of the things that we considered when preparing this plan for this committee's consideration is that the importance of complete communities. I think one thing that the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed is how important it is to be within walking distance or easy access to different shops and services, and especially green space. And that's of course a core concept of this plan, and I think something that it reflects the importance of it that's been highlighted by the pandemic. Also note that the central plan already includes flexible land use controls, particularly for mixed use areas like downtowns and centers where it's, both office development and residential uses are permitted. So, should the market's needs change, office buildings can be converted to residential uses, for example. And I think, again, the COVID-19 pandemic is highlighting the importance of that flexibility. In response to some of the feedback received about the pandemic, we have adjusted the pedestrian-oriented commercial streets to allow for office uses outside of downtown designation. And this is because office uses can also bring activity to the streets. Some office uses are pretty varied, and some of them are actually quite active, and also recognizes that some of the main streets may struggle to fill those commercial spaces in your near future, and it provides additional commercial opportunities on those important corridors. Also highlight the proposed streamlined development approval process, like the streamlining of the site plan approval process, for example, should help bring projects to construction phase sooner, which could help, which partially help with addressing some of the housing demands and housing needs in our area. And also, we'll note that we've proposing to increase the development agreement transition time frames, recognizing that major developments have also faced challenges because of the pandemic. Another thing, kind of last aspect of Package B I want to highlight for the committee is that the previously proposed draft of Package B proposed the transition site plan approval applications similar to development agreements. And through our last review, we learned that this is not actually supported by the H&M Charter because it's more of a as a right process, not a discretionary process. So unfortunately, site plan approval applications that are been approved but haven't gone to the construction phase wouldn't be necessarily be granted unless they have construction permits in place. This is expected to have limited impacts on package areas because the requirements aren't proposed to change very much, or if anything, generally are a little bit less stringent, a little bit less prescriptive. And we will note that we are working with applicants in the downtown Halifax plan area to assess impacts because the framework is a little bit different between downtown Halifax and the central plan, particularly when it comes to bonus zoning and also some of the variations that were enabled on the Halifax plan. I will also highlight the responses to site-specific requests that I think this committee knows. We received a lot of correspondence and a lot of requests for change of zoning or heights or other aspects for individual properties. Staff reviews them carefully, and I've tried to provide a clear rationale in the staff report, but why certain requests were supported and some were others. Some key considerations we looked at in making our recommendations include opportunities to correct errors or inconsistencies with policies. So obviously, if it was an error, we would correct it. Impacts on neighboring properties, if there were minimal impacts and it was supported by policy, then generally it could be something that could be supported. Opportunities to reduce nonconformities, supporting the local context and alignment with the approved central plan and regional plan policies or resource council decisions and public feedback. And there are two detailed tables attached to the staff report, attachment K and attachment L, that outline summarize the request, the staff response, and the rationale for that. Okay, coming to the end of this presentation, I'm happy to pass it back to the committee for questions and discussion. Just want to, with the approval of a new regional central plan, comes with part of achieving the goal of the plan and bylaw simplification process is to reduce the number of plans and to I guess to repeal some of the older existing plans. So you'll see as part of the motions the proposal to repeal the regional central plan for package A because it's going to be incorporated into the one comprehensive plan. The complete repeal of the downtown Dartmouth plan, given that now will be wholly part of the regional central plan, as well as to repeal the Halifax Peninsula land use bylaw, which is one of the oldest, based on one of the oldest land use bylaws work. And also amendments to the Dartmouth secondary plan strategy because it will continue to live on in other parts of Dartmouth. So carving off a big area of that Dartmouth plan. And as I mentioned, also amendments to the downtown Halifax plan, it would still live on for the proposed HCD, for the existing, the approved HCDs, the Barrington Street and Old South Suburb until it can be incorporated into the regional central planning framework as through the downtown Halifax HCD process. I'll quickly touch on governance, which was, partially that was largely discussed and direction provided in Package A. Through this process, the direction to make minor amendments to various AOs, support the continuation of the community council roles for Harbour East Marine Drive and Halifax West and the regional center community councils. So that's with the Halifax West and Harbour East continuing to look to be responsible for site-specific requests like development agreements, and the regional center community council continuing to be responsible for more plan area-wide considerations, land use bylaw text amendments, and also potential appeals to the site plan approvals. There are proposed direction to provide updates to the Design Advisory Committee terms of reference, largely just to reflect the changes scope of the plan area, not just Package A areas, but Package B areas as well. A continuation of the Design Review Committee that would still remain in place for the remaining portion of downtown Halifax plan. And I also note some minor updates to the administrative orders respecting bonus zoning benefits and grants for affordable housing based on previous council direction, essentially to help to provide a bit more flexibility in how money in lieu funds can be used after they're collected. The process from here going forward, I think this is a type of chart I think this committee has been getting familiar with. We're at the early stages of the formal committee and council review process, starting with this committee, CDAC, and the Heritage Advisory Committee later this afternoon. Later this month, we are planning to, we'll be going to the community councils for their recommendations. Community Planning Economic Development Standing Committee, targeting to reach this committee in July, and also the recommendations from the Design Review Committee, with all the recommendations coming together to Regional Council for discussion at committee as a whole. And at this point, we are continuing to target a public hearing for late September. But of course, this depends on the feedback we receive from the committee and this, the ability to go forward with a major public hearing during the social distancing requirements that are during the pandemic. I'll just quickly, I won't read out the recommendations, but I'll put it on the screen quickly. It's in the agenda. But in short, the multiple parts of this recommendation really are: one, to approve to start with the approval of the regional center plan and land use bylaw as proposed, subject to different feedback from the committee, and also the repeal and amendments to the existing planning documents to, again, as part of the bylaw simplification process, approving a new plan and amending and repealing some of the old plans. And thank you. I hope that was a good overview of what was in the staff report, and it's in the plans. And I think at this point, myself and a number of planning staff are here to answer questions and help guide the committee in how you review and give and provide recommendations to CPED. Thank you, and I'll stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Fred Morley, the chair.
Thanks, Ben. You did a great job at summarizing, I don't know, 600 to 800 pages of documents involved in this process. There's a lot to chew on here. I think the recommendation, and we'll move to questions, and I see hands coming up. I think we'll maybe deal with the recommendations, the last slide you had up previously. My expectation, and I think the committee's expectation, has been we'll probably deal with that, the recommendations on the meeting of the 23rd. And it's become the practice of the committee, I guess, when we put something forward to CPED, we will put forward these recommendations, and we also put forward some considerations for CPED to chew on, that they should consider as they move through their own approval process. So I think we'll we'll probably do the same thing in this case, just, and we'll pull that together hopefully on the 23rd, in about 3 weeks' time. Let's move to questions. So if you have a question, please indicate on the by raising your hand virtually on the Zoom app. That would be quite useful. And the first one I have up is from Way Mason, Councillor Mason.
So formal today, Fred. So you don't want the motion put on the floor now? We'll do that at the next meeting, or usually the custom is to put it on the floor and debate it, but we have been more fluid here.
Yeah, I was thinking we keep that, keep things going of that nature. We've had a presentation, so let's just discuss it. And we've seen the recommendation. It's we're familiar with it.
All right.
I'm not sure anyone is going to harshly disagree with it going forward. Maybe, but let's see.
Who knows? All right. Well, I'll just dive in and say, great work, staff. I have been reading it all weekend and this week, and texting folks and saying, "Am I missing something?" Because it seems like a non-controversial and as far as any of these things go. So I'm going to go through the notes that I made here. I have a lot more thoughts on the matter that I'm still putting together more for regional center and Halifax and West community councils, but things that I think make sense to talk about at the committee. One comment, and I emailed the clerks and Kasha got into this conversation, was I think it would be advantageous to have a single zip file with the entire package in it to download, because it's really, there's so much, it's very laborious to go and download all the different parts. So if you get it, won't fit apparently on halifax.ca. If we could get that on Shape Your City, that'd be amazing. I think everyone would appreciate it. I still have only downloaded about 20% of it. So my questions and comments are, and I'll just give them all to you at once, Ben, I think is the best way to go, is heritage DAs were something that we're seeing a lot of pickup on, and there were concerns about the height limits in the current MPS and LUB, for example, in the area around South Park, between Tower and South Park and that area, that they weren't allowed. And I don't see anything in the plan about that, which could be okay, because it could mean that the heritage bylaw now just applies and they can negotiate those. But I'm interested in finding out more about that, because I thought there had to be some enabling pieces on heritage DAs in there. DA on RC1, thank you. The cluster zoning, cluster housing zone, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more, or maybe we could get a briefing on that maybe in one of the next meetings, because we know there's a lot of not-for-profits that own land, and there's city-owned land both in the regional center, and I think this will be the template for the rest of the region that want to do tiny homes. And I want to know, I guess it's too much to say it should just be an overlay and we're going to consider it everywhere by DA, but it's still like a DA process is hard, a rezoning process is hard. So I want to talk about that, unpack that a bit. The ER zone, excellent. Still a change though. It's not like we're not, I support everything I've read so far. I'm going to do a big analysis against the email that I sent the committee and to staff, but it looks like all those questions have been answered. I like the clean approach. It is a change, and residents should be aware that doing ER2 in the, where it used to be R2 is different, because it's no longer, the internal conversions aren't constrained by, unless I'm missing it, by lot size or any of that stuff, right? That it's just, you can do duplexes or 2 units. But I think that's fine. And I think that the market can determine that as long as the design controls are good. What we're actually seeing in the neighborhood right now in this market we're living in is that people are buying duplexes or over and unders and turning them back into single family homes. So it's actually not, it's going the other way right now in large parts of the area. So I don't have a problem with that. I'd really like you to unpack the university zone not needing to open up the plan. That I don't understand. I missed that when I read it. And that's a big contention in the area, is the universities have kind of promised we're going to go this far and no farther. going back to the battles in the 80s, early 80s, late 70s around Dalplex. And so I think residents would be concerned to know that just because Dal or St. Mary's or AST or NASCAD buy a property, that it would be eligible to be rezoned. Like, I'd like to know more about that. Grain elevator, could you explain the grain elevator control a bit better and how big it is? I haven't downloaded that map yet. Downtown signs. We had a letter 5 years ago, I think, from Neptune about how they wanted to put a classic marquee. You think about that classic picture of the 1940s or 50s of the big Paramount Theater sign hanging out the front of Barrington Street. That wouldn't be allowed right now under any of our bylaws. And they wanted to put one of those in front of Neptune, and they wouldn't have been allowed to do so. And so they sent in a request asking for that. And it's something I have only just been reminded about in the last 2 weeks. And I'm wondering whether or not that was addressed. In that letter, it was kind of indicated that the signs that we have put on our building, the Metro Center, the Scotiabank Center, are not compliant with the land use bylaw either. So we need the push was that we should have an exception for by DA or by whatever, some process for large entertainment and sports facilities, because they have different needs than a normal business, than H&M or Biscuit or something. And then my final question was on downtown. I understand in principle, I think the conversion from site plan approval to land use bylaw by right for most of the center plan. I think we need more detail, maybe in a subsequent meeting, on the impacts that has on the downtown plan. Maybe on both, because I think I understand it, but I'm not going to say I really understand it. And I feel like really unpacking that is something that would be useful. And those are my comments so far. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, staff.
Ben, do you have Ben and staff, I guess, do you have some response to Way's comments?
Yes, thank you. Through you, the chair. I think I can touch on some, but maybe not everything that Councillor Mason brought up. A lot of good questions and comments there. First, I was making a list, so I'll just run through it. So first, with respect to the Heritage DA development agreement policies, the intent of that is, I think, as Councillor knows, is to incentivize heritage preservation and allowing for a little bit more opportunities for allowing more flexibility through a discretionary process. So that under the proposed policy, it does allow for heights to exceed the height frameworks or far. But I mean, there's a number of different controls in place, criteria in place to make sure that it's still contextually appropriate, and for council to be able to support or not support different proposals. And one of the key ones is also that the level of additional development is proportional to the amount of investment in heritage preservation. So the idea is that you can't just preserve a small property and expect to get a lot. So there's flexibility provided, but it also kind of checks and balances in place, we think, to make sure that it doesn't go overboard in terms of potentially allowing for much larger buildings that are intended for area, but somewhat larger buildings potentially, yes. The cluster housing zone, thank you for the questions with that. And this zone is partially in response to, I think, councillors might remember the staff report on the Homes for Heroes, interested in affordable housing and clustering small units on the same lot. So the cluster housing zone is intended to accommodate that type of development scenarios. You actually see it fairly common in more suburban and rural areas. And this would enable that for kind of a regular shaped properties in the regional center. So it's applied in limited areas. And at this point, we're saying a rezoning process because it's hard to predict where it's appropriate. We don't think a development agreement is needed just because the zoning requirements can cover it. We don't need to control for hours of operations. And the scale is somewhat limited, because once you get bigger, you get to a point, where like actually developing a public road makes sense. These are 10 different areas where you wouldn't want to. It doesn't make sense to put in a small public road when you're really just trying to service 10 to 20 type of up to 24 units on the same lot. But you're happy to get further feedback or discussion on that one. That was comments. In terms of the university college expansion, again, open to comments from the committee or recommendations. The proposal here to enable amendments to the rezoning process instead of MPS amendment process is to recognize that sometimes the boundaries of universities and hospitals have changed. And Dalhousie has brought up that they are looking at acquiring small properties here and there. I didn't want to be overly constrained about, no, here's the designation and you can't move further. recognize that there could be concerns about it in the community, but at the same time, it has to go through a discretionary process, council review, public consultation. And if council doesn't support it, then there's opportunities to say to refuse it.
I can support that. I thought what I was hearing is there was some kind of other thing, so that's great. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of the green elevator, the area that kind of we're focused on is about 60 meters from the green elevator. And it's really just that the green elevators are pretty large facilities that are, like all green elevators or around the world really come safe for on their major industrial sites. And it just as a matter of being, as a precautionary measure, there's a development agreement policy to manage residential development in the short term while we're continuing to work with our partners at the Halifax Port Authority to actually do a specific study to understand this particular context and how we can mitigate to this. No particular risk, no particular immediate concerns, is more of a long-term planning strategy to ensure we're allowing the appropriate amount of development around that important facility. Downtown signs. This one I have to look into in a little bit more. This is a comment that comes to mind is in the draft we do include a new variations that provides quite a lot of flexibility for cultural and public uses, like things like sports stadiums and Neptune theaters and things like that, recognizing that sometimes the design controls just don't make sense, like the street walls and the different design requirements, just to have the unique features. Signs weren't particularly thought about for that variation, but that could be an opportunity, and it may already be covered, but that could be an opportunity for that exception you were talking about, that a site plan tool might be a good use of that tool in this case, for also larger signs, not for any use, but for cultural uses in particular. So that's something I think I'll have to look at with the team a bit more.
I'll forward you the emails from I just found them from 2016.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, no, thanks. I wasn't aware of that particular ask, so we'll have to look into that. In the site plan approval, yeah, I mean, maybe that's something I could come back at a future meeting to dive into the rationale for that one for a bit more. You're right. I think for package A, it is a bit of a clearer. The difference is it results in more streamlined without much of a change in requirements. Under current package A, that they're prescriptive requirements, but you still have to go through kind of these steps, and those requirements really aren't changing. It's more the process is changing, not the design requirements. Whereas I think for downtown Halifax, the change there is that under the existing downtown Halifax plan, the variations are fairly wide open. And so those variations aren't proposed to be carried forward with package B. So the change in approach there on one hand does streamline the approval process if you meet the requirements, but doesn't include some of those variations of things like side setbacks or building dimensions that are currently considered under the downtown Halifax plan. So on one hand, it both streamlines and also provides a bit more constraint than some of the downtown developments. And that's why we're working with property owners to have approved site plan approvals in place to understand impacts. I think that was it. And some of them we'll have to circle back on.
Thanks, Ben, and for those comebacks. Sam, I have you up next. Sam Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Comeback sounds so much more aggressive than what we're doing. So thank you, staff, for all the work. I had a similar reaction to Councillor Mason of going through, just kind of nodding through a lot of it. I've still not done my own detailed review. I've been through all the reports and have spent hours poring over the map in Dartmouth to look for site-specific, whether this property should be ER2 or ER3, those sorts of things throughout, the Dartmouth area. And I will have a list of recommended, at least to me recommended, we'll see if my colleagues agree, for Harbour East, because I think it's more worthwhile for the committee to focus on the bigger sort of policy discussion rather than that kind of nitty gritty detail of, well, what's okay at the corner of Pine and Myrtle, right, in downtown Dartmouth. in my review, I unfortunately left my page with 20 notes on it on my desk at City Hall. So I've done my best to recreate my top bunch here on the fly. The ones that I agree with Councillor Mason. I'd like to see, and maybe in our next meeting, a little bit more as to what went into the cluster zone. That was a bit of a surprise for me. That one, I think it makes sense, but I think it would be worthwhile for the committee to have some more on that. Certainly the Southdale future growth node is one that I'm thinking about a whole lot more than I ever expected to, because this was kind of a future growth node when we started this process of, well, this is a sleepy little place. Nothing really is going to happen here. It's mainly a swamp. But then the property sold and suddenly there's interest in it. So that one I plan to dig some more into. I'm interested what the staff, what's going on exactly with the streamlining piece, right? Because I am a little concerned there, of what that all means in terms of design review and citizen notification, citizen involvement. And I know, we've not had to, I'll be blunt about it, we've not had really productive sessions at Regional Center Community Council in terms of appeals. Most of the appeals that have come to Regional Center Community Council haven't had a whole lot of validity to them. They're more of appeals of, I do not like this building being built in my neighborhood, not an appeal of the actual land use thing. It's basically the appeals have been fighting the original decision to allow that sort of development at that spot, not appeals of a substantial nature of, in this particular development project, I think, your variation X is not appropriate because of this. It's been more fighting the underlying philosophy, which is not what that was meant to be. So I get the challenge there, but I wouldn't want to see the pendulum go too far the other way, because, there's varying results. Some developers are open to neighborhood feedback. They're open to making changes. Some of them really aren't. There is a wide cross section there, and I'm worried that are we potentially letting go of that softer side? You don't have to necessarily change this, but you know what? People in the community are asking you to do it. Your fellow design professionals are suggesting you make this change. And you know what? I think this will make for a better project. Are we, in streamlining, are we too much narrowing this to an exercise that is really, here's my application, staff run through a checklist, and then away they go. And I think I'll leave it at that, is because I think that's probably the most substantial concern I have at this time.
Ben, any thoughts? Any response?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I think between Councillor Mason's and Councillor Austin's comments that we'd be happy to come back at a future meeting to dive into the cluster housing zone and the proposed changes to the site plan approval process in more detail. I'll quickly touch on the site plan approval process as to follow on Councillor Austin's comments. I think you're absolutely, there are with any tool there's some pros and cons. With some experience under our belt with package A, we landed on that under the current process there's more cons than pros with using the site plan tool for requirements that are prescriptive in nature. So I think you've experienced the regional center community council that the consultation goes out and people have this impression that they can influence the building height, or they can influence whether it's permitted or not, used to development agreements and rezoning processes, and actually we're kind of seeing it actually creates more frustration and angst than it's worth. Especially since the requirements are already, in some ways, we're already checking the box of the site plan approval process, and yes, there's an opportunity to maybe a comment is considered by the developer, but in most cases, we're not really seeing that happen very often. And reserving the site plan approval tool, which we think is actually more designed into the charter is for the exception, not the rule. So it's if you want to do something different, then it's allowed under the land use bylaw. The site plan approval tool is really a good one to do that because it can deal with the shades of gray. it's not really a great tool when you're dealing with more black and white requirements, which is the way it's being used now. And also with a future eye to suburban plan, that it's also very resource intensive. And to think about doing that for all, medium to large scale developments, not just in the regional center, but region wide, would be a lot of be a lot of time of staff and councillor committees and so on. But we can dive into more on that if the committee is interested in it, because you're right, it is, I think, probably the most significant change in terms of package A approved approach. We can dive into that in more detail in a future meeting.
Okay, if I can, Mr. Chair, just briefly to conclude, I don't think the resident angst piece goes away just because you cut off the only appeal piece that they have, even if the appeal piece is, as it turns out, when they get to the end of it, they realize I couldn't have actually appealed the fundamental things that I was against in the first place. I don't think you actually eliminate that challenge problem just because it says, like, well, guess what, now you have no outlet, right? I don't think that necessarily goes away. You didn't touch on the design part of it, like with this going to with site plan being reduced, does that also reduce the scope not just of the resident piece but of that design professional committee review?
I was gonna say, through the chair, I guess the answer to that one question is both a bit of a yes and no. So no, in that the design requirements are still in the land use file. They're just not site plan approval requirements or standard land use bylaw requirements. So still have to have X% of glazing on the ground floor. You still need to do, have your doors and things like that look like a certain way. But to your point, the design advisory committee would be limited to the site plan variations, not the as a right requirement. So the design requirements themselves are largely carried forward, just clarified, but the role of the design advisory committee would be limited to those variations.
Okay, thank you. I know I've overfilled my time, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
No, thanks, Sam. Dale, so you have a question? And you have to unmute, Dale.
May have gone to lunch, really. I mean,
Maybe, yeah. Let's, she's probably trying to unmute there. Dale, we'll come back to you. I had a question from Catherine Morris. You had a question or a comment?
Yes, thanks, Fred. Just to Ben, what a mind-boggling project for someone who wasn't involved in the previous 5 years of your work. It's really impressive, and thank you for your presentation. I guess my understanding is that some aspects of the work that's been done will inform future plans for areas outside of the center. And so I'm wondering if you could just briefly kind of give me a sense of what themes or what parts of this will be applied in other parts of HRM.
Okay, thanks for the question, and through the chair, Fred Morley. I think I can answer this question in both ways. First the caveat being we haven't actually fully dived into the suburban plan, so in some ways it's a little bit premature to say for sure. But the initial thinking with this being the first phase of bylaw simplification is that a lot of the, I wouldn't say the details, but a lot of the kind of policy framework that is established in the regional center could be quite easily applied into to the suburban areas, and of course tailored for the suburban context. So things like just identifying centers where the high growth areas are and corridors along transit routes. So directing growth to transit corridors it can be extended to suburban context, protecting established residential areas, and consolidating those zones and tailoring as needed to the different areas. So again, another kind of policy approach that I could see be carrying forward. There's probably future growth node type areas in suburban areas too, where some neighborhood scale master planning is warranted. And I mean, things like even just having a updated industrial zoning, institutional zoning, like these are also the uses that are in suburban plans. So you can kind of some of the, of course, everything needs to be tailored, and suburban areas are even more diverse, you know, compared to Eastern Passage and Bedford, for example. But a lot of the kind of overall tools and approaches, things like the use of bonus zoning and how we land on the site plan approval tool, you know, those things are, we have some place to start from for the suburban plan, and can be kind of tailored and revised to fit the suburban context. So I hope that helps. Like I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself on that, but this is kind of a general background thinking that we're talking about as staff.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And Ben, Dale, your microphone is open.
Yes, it is open. I found it in 2 different places. Amazing. I guess I'd like to comment first on the work staff. I think it was excellent from what I can see. In some ways, it's incomprehensible to me because the piece that we got today is the piece I would have liked to have had 3 or 4 meetings ago. So the work that you've done is applauded, but it's not, to me, connected well to the process that we're going through. We haven't considered most of these things as we went along, and now they're there as almost something that's approved. Let me take 2 examples. One is that the established residential ones were what we used to call stable communities when we were working on HRM by design. And later on the regional plan and the earlier work on the center, there was always almost a commitment in early drafts that we would go very light on established residential areas. And that's not what has happened, though there's some improvements in some areas on it. I don't think it's sufficiently laid out that I could vote for or against it. So I'm a little bit unhappy with what I'm seeing, and I'm worn down by trying to get back to the same principles and never seeming to finish them. The other one would be the as-of-right development corridors and townhouse development as solutions to affordable housing challenges without demonstrating why that is the case. I mean, what are we trying to get for the regional center? How many people, how many houses? What is the picture that we're aiming at? I don't see it. I just see all the Band-Aids, and some of them are very big Band-Aids and very good, just being plopped on that. As of next week, if we were really doing our job, I think we would have do 1/3 at the most of the wonderful slides and work that you did, Ben. But to me, it's not sufficient for me to vote at this point. I feel strongly that it's not your fault about COVID, but that the processes we've gone through have not been at a high enough level. We shouldn't be doing little things at this committee, but this is not a little thing. The 2 that I am interested in, I'll put them on the table. I would like to go back a bit further than this, but I won't, is the established residential zoning. A review of that. You touched on it in your slides, and it was a good beginning. And also a question about right development, as of right development corridors, and whether there's solutions to affordable housing challenges. I mean, this is a big nut to crack. And is this the only one that's been considered? Why is this one the one that's been picked? So I see lots of good questions here, but I don't see very many answers that have been. Perhaps it's because I'm not a counselor and I don't have 10 hours every day, and I really thank you very much for the work you do, and we're lucky to have you. Anyway, not happy about it. I think it's very different from what I thought we were getting into. I think there's a hell of a lot more work before we could even take it through to CPID, but other people may feel differently. I'll stop there. I have other ideas, but I think they'd be better at the next meeting.
Ben.
Thanks. I'll have a quick comment, I guess, through just to respond to Dale's comments. First of all, appreciate the feedback and look forward to further comments you may have. I'll just quickly touch on the ER zoning. So I think, as I outlined, the intent here, yes, is to preserve the established residential areas, but through the purple document and previous consultation, it's also about accommodating increasing housing options. So it's not really about accommodating more density, like a small amount. Most of the density of regional center is for the corridors and centers and future growth nodes. But with household sizes generally decreasing over time, that the existing housing stock is actually reducing the population in established adjacent areas where used to be families of 5, 6 or more in a single unit dwelling, being contained by 1 or 2. So the housing options part is about enabling some of those existing larger homes or other infill products to be able to have a couple of smaller units instead of one large one. It's about kind of recognizing the changing demographics and different housing needs right now, and not necessarily the goal increase density. It's about the housing options part. So I'll leave it there, and I think point taken about your comments, and appreciate you diving into the material.
Well, when I was chair of the school board, that was when they dropped a huge amount because of the exact same problem. It's going to continue, smaller houses, smaller units. But we've never really on this committee dug into that, and it looks to me like a post-it note, a good one, but not necessarily sitting on the right part of the map.
Thanks, Dale and Ben. What might be useful to the committee and going forward to other groups as well is a little bit of an indication of what the current status is of population and population growth in the regional center, growth in housing units in the regional center. Are we hitting our targets? Are we blowing by our targets? And I think we have set certain targets. We haven't set targets that are kind of for unlimited growth or as much growth as we can get. We've set certain targets for growth, I think. So understanding where we stand now might be helpful to the committee, might be helpful to certainly as a starting point, a baseline going forward as council and other groups think this over. Just a thought there. Who else we have here? Patty, you had a thought or a comment.
Thank you, Fred. Dale, I am with you on this is a huge amount of work and a tough nut to crack. And there are so many pieces, and kind of getting it all in one lump sum and trying to navigate the pieces and fit it all together. It's an extraordinary amount of work. And I too am wondering if there is a way to go through this in which we can focus on specific pieces, piece by piece. I just feel that there's a tendency for us to kind of go to the things that we're most interested in and gloss over the other things. But at the same time, feel it's really important that we do have a really balanced look at all the pieces and some meaningful discussion around it. So, kind of when it's all presented in one go, it's you kind of don't know where to start or how to start. And there's pieces in here that I read through, and of course, I'm always excited to see them, like that are great. But there's also a lot of questions associated with them as well. Well, the one piece I was interested in, and I'm bringing this up because we did receive a piece of correspondence about it. It was in relation to renewable energy technologies, and I think as we go forward, and I know this new kind of council, you have a new council to deal with in the midst of doing this work, which is a challenge in and of itself. But I am interested in the center plan around what are the pieces in there to support renewable energy technologies, and what are we suggesting for what goals and what ends? And I don't know if you're able to speak to that now, or if this is the place. I'm not even sure if this is the place to do it, or how it works, kind of jumping into the center plan. But that is, I would like to hear a bit more about that, if this is appropriate time for it.
Just happy to respond if I can through the chair, Fred Morley. I think one of the most important parts that the regional center plan is doing in terms of supporting kind of the net zero energy targets and energy conservation is partly just the planning framework and its relationship to transportation. So just directing growth to areas where people can walk to work and walk and use transit is one of the kind of key parts of kind of the environment and energy part of the conversation. Just to highlight that one. The other one is we can't necessarily force the development of renewable energy, but we can certainly remove the barriers to it. So that's where having height exemptions for rooftop solar panels, for example, so that just because somebody's built to the maximum height, they can still decide years later to add solar panels afterwards, and it's not a major constraint. And also, opportunities, so allowing for utility type uses in all zones, so that whether it's Nova Scotia Power infrastructure or some sort of communal energy system, that could be allowed, particularly looked at through future growth nodes. I will note that we did receive some requests to include renewable energy as one of the bonus zoning categories, and buried in the staff report, one of the appendixes, there is a bit of a response to that about why staff did not support adding that to the bonus zoning categories, largely having to do with having had the debate through package A. The more you add categories, the more the benefits get diluted, and just really that the bonus zoning tool has its strengths, but it's not necessarily the strongest tool we feel for that type of benefit, with our focus mainly more being on net zero construction, which we're at this point focusing on monitoring potential updates to the building national building code and provincial building code, which really can get into that type of requirements more so than a plan and land use bylaw. So I know that may partially respond to what you're trying to get at, but
actually, I just wanted kind of an introduction into it. So there's a whole piece around incentivizing net zero or net plus communities. I'm interested in how we allow through our planning bylaws and municipal planning strategy community or district energy systems, and kind of what the from a planning perspective, what that means in terms of zoning and bylaws and how we can enable it. But from what you're saying, it sounds like we would consider, or we allow, or are there zoning and bylaw mechanisms that need to be in place to make those things happen?
Yeah, again, through the chair, if I could quickly respond, in short, we are constrained with the tools we have in the Halifax Charter. So, as council may be aware, there is a recent amendment to the Halifax Charter specifically require hookups to district energy in the Cogswell area only, and so that's the only place in the municipality where we can actually require developments to use a district energy system. Other places like future growth node, it's really more of a consideration. We really can't force private developments to choose natural gas, for example, or electric power, or kind of make those type of choices. But through that master planning process, we can certainly make sure that the topic's explored, and that there's no regulatory or policy barriers. For example, if the future growth node wanted to do some sort of modern type of wind turbine, and our zoning rules wouldn't allow it, then that's something. Off my headphones, talking in my hands. That's something that the future growth node could look at, or just the way that the whole community is designed. Things like solar exposure. So I guess the short answer is we can't require it, but we can certainly look at making sure that just the way we control development doesn't preclude it, and that any kind of shared facilities is allowed for. And it's kind of it's probably most relevant to the future road master planning process, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Patty and Ben. Sam, I have, are you back or you're, no?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have one more that I wanted to highlight for staff, and I think it's probably more of a maybe a high-level answer now, and I would like for the committee to take a look at it a little bit more. Same caveat, I've spent my time on the staff reports and poring over the maps. I haven't done a detailed read yet of the actual plan. I have to do that before our next one. The piece I'm wondering about is the design standard changes that are referenced in the report, specifically the height changes for sloping streets, and the pedestrian oriented dimension piece. It's something that I've cared about. I harped on it all through package A, because the issue that I'm concerned about is what do our design standards end up meaning for our pedestrian oriented streets. It is far easier for a developer to do basically as long a facade as they can with as little variation to it as possible, with as big of floor plates as possible. And so that sort of impulse kind of runs up against our public purpose of, well, we want to have interesting streets. I think of, and I know it's downtown Halifax plan, but I think of like the Doyle block is always my go-to example, where it is one long unbroken expanse. And it's hard for me anyway, from a street level perspective, to look at what has gone there and say, that block is now more interesting than it was. It's not, right? We had more variation, we had more interest, we had more mix of materials. It felt like a much more interesting block as before, and I worry that we're about to see the same thing happen on the kitty corner from there, across from the library on Spring Garden, on the block that's been leveled there. That what we're going to end up with is that long blank glass unbroken facade. And so, and the other piece is with hills, it's the same sort of dynamic. People don't like having to do floors that don't necessarily line up. It's far easier to just have that one floor across. And so on hill streets, you tend to not have that interest. You don't have that wraparound stuff. We knew how to build more interesting streets and cities in the past. Some of that seems to have been lost. And so one of my main things in package A was like trying to require that kind of interest on the street level, because it's not all bad. It can be done. I think of the Vic at Hollis and Morris is always my go-to example of, it is possible to do a modern building that actually can sort of reference that historical context, and that can have that interesting sort of street front. I think of the one up by the Hydrostone. I think it's St. Joe's. I mean, that one also does a very good design, very, very good job in different ways. And so, I would like to get some more information as to what those design requirements are that are changing in terms of what it means for, because we as a committee as a council, as a collective, we're very clear that we want to see a better job with our hill streets, and we want to see a better, more interesting job done with our main streets than what we've been getting.
Thanks for those additional comments. If I could respond through the Fred, through you to share.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. No, thanks. So good questions. A good and good observation, really. First of all, I guess on the height changes. So that's package A did include some flexibility for sloping streets, and the message loud and clear from our feedback from through the approved package A is that Halifax, the regional center, is a sloping area, and the kind of consistent feedback from designers and developers is that 5% the accommodations that was in package A, it isn't enough, that it was creating design problems. And so package B is proposing to increase that a little. We think we're still in the reasonable range for that to make it possible. But that is the rationale for that. It's kind of based on the experience and what the actual proposals were coming in and some of the a lot of consistent feedback from developers and designers on that point. And that's something I can probably work with the team and give. Come back with maybe some examples or something like that to illustrate that maybe more tangibly. On the pedestrian or on the commercial street, I absolutely hear your comment there. I think the intent here was to carry forward the intent, but to provide a bit more flexibility, again, based on experience and stakeholder feedback. Because what we, on one hand, absolutely you want the more variety and the more smaller storefronts on Commercial Street absolutely involve more interest. At the same time, you know, from a business development perspective, also don't want to put barriers up to, you know, a storefront, you know, buying an next property owner and expanding, and suddenly having to have 2 doors instead of 1 just really, you know, may not work with the flow. COVID-19 was also consideration. We're actually managing entryways is actually proven to be important, and it was part of consideration. So the size limit, or I guess the maximum size was adjusted to kind of reflect kind of a reasonable expansion of a small business into a large business without throwing up barriers to that. You know, so you could a small business could expand the next storefront over, maybe the storefront after that, but after that, okay, something needs to give. And also, you know, out of concern of discouraging some of the bigger box type stores, the Canadian Tires or grocery stores, we do want those located on our PR streets. You don't want to push them out to I don't know, industrial park type area. So providing some flexibility for that, and that's where a new proposed site plan variation comes in, so that if a business does want to go beyond the size constraint, that it does go through that site plan variation process where you do have input from design professionals, and they have to still articulate, make it look like it's more than 1 storefront. You know, do something more with public art and landscaping in those areas without saying no, never. If you want to have a bigger store, you have to go somewhere else. So that was the thinking behind that, is to carry forward the intent, but in a little bit more flexible way that recognizes that business needs to change and adapt, and also don't want to necessarily get in the way of business expansion and have a larger type of retail stores from locating in the areas where we actually want them.
Okay. If I may, Mr. Chair, I personally think I'd like to see more on that at our next meeting. My challenge is, even reading the plan, it's not going to be easy for anyone except for a professional to ascertain, like, you know, are we hitting the right balance there in terms of, you know, what we need to do? Because if I think history has well shown at this point that if we just lead it to the feedback of the design of the developers and their architects who are working on things to solve a specific problem, we will not get the result that we actually want, because that result makes things a little harder for them. And, you know, it's that sweet spot of requiring a little bit more in terms of design without making it something that then is too onerous for them. And, you know, I don't have any ability to assess whether or not we're in that sweet spot without more information. So I think I'd like to see more on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. So Sam raises a good point about the next meeting, and I think we have one scheduled. The regularly scheduled meeting for June is on the 23rd. But I kind of want to reserve that for, you know, pushing forward whatever our recommendation to community planning and economic development is going to be. So I think we want to, you know, move something forward on the 23rd. I think we should have a meeting between now and then, either perhaps next Wednesday, the 9th, or the 16th, the Wednesday after that. With the committee's indulgence, perhaps I'll work with staff to see which one of those dates works best. I know, you know, these kinds of special meetings are a challenge for a lot of folks, particularly the volunteer members who, you know, have a challenge getting away from day jobs and this kind of thing. But perhaps to try to work with that a little bit, I think what I'll also do is reach out to members that, you know, didn't have an opportunity to chat today and see what they think about things. I think we'll also try to put together an agenda for the next meeting that reflects the areas of concentration that people have talked about. Sam, your points, Dale's point on the changes to established residential. I would add, a couple of things like how we deal with risk in this process. Like the committee has an interest in this, but council will own it at the end of the day. So to some extent, council bears all the risk going forward. So I think often when policies are presented, there is some kind of a risk framework presented at the same time. So I'd like to talk about that briefly and what that might look like. Any other suggestions for items to discuss on the next day, please forward them my way, and we'll make sure they get in there. We want to focus in on a few things, I guess. And as Sam said, there's a lot here to chew on. We can't possibly deal with everything, but I think we want to try to deal with the major issues that will affect the palatability of this. Having said that, there's a lot to like. The committee pushed hard on established residential issues over time, and there have been a lot of positive changes. I think the committee would probably like to see a few more. I think as well, the committee pushed hard on, having institutional zones, business zones, health-based zoning, to have those areas kind of recognized within the regional center as distinct, and very pleased to see that kind of effort as well. So lots to like, a few things we have to work on going forward, and we'll try to wade through that. I think at the next meeting, we only have about 4 minutes left at this one. Does that sound generally agreeable to the committee? Yes?
Yeah, it does. And Fred, I think you raised a good point, because I'm going to have the same presentation, I believe, at the Heritage Advisory Committee this afternoon, and I'm probably going to see it a few more times. But it might be good to think about, with this specific committee, what are the areas of our mandate and specific interest as it relates to the center plan, and focus on those. And in that regard, I apologize for jumping into something like, renewable energy, but maybe just, kind of revisiting what this committee's main interests are in this document might help focus the discussion and our kind of points of interest.
Yeah, thanks, Patty. Agree totally. I think we do have, one of our main responsibilities is to flag and deal with communication challenges or issues as they may arise. And this is particularly important given the challenges with consultation that COVID brought us. So certainly issues under the communications mandate of the committee, the advice that we are asked to provide there is going to be pretty important going forward. And I think as well, overarching concerns, big picture concerns that, that affect how people perceive this plan. It's hard for the committee to get into the nitty gritty. And I think Dale mentioned this, really the extreme detail, but I think it is our job to deal with the big picture aspects of this and what makes it palatable to and acceptable to people going forward.
Great. I just wanted to add one thing. Thank you, Penny, by the way, for the earlier remarks and these. I'm with you. I guess for me, it is the big picture ones that we perhaps need to go back to the page that told us in the beginning why we were doing this and see how all this fits in, slots into that. I mean, it's a bit like a risk analysis or a rationale or whatever. But I also, so I think we need to have more background to things that have similar characteristics, and we could work on them as a I guess sorry, losing my mind here. Work on them as a group. But the final thing is, I think before we finish with this process, we should look at the procedures that we followed in order to come to this point, and not pointing fingers at anyone, just looking for ways of increasing the effectiveness of the systems we use to do this sort of policy work and all of the rules that are around that. And I mean, there's quite a few in there that could be questioned. Why do we have committees that go directly to council when everything else goes through us? So some of those. And finally, I think governance is an important piece. And I think in most governance models, you bring back the past in order to show why you're doing things. So I would recommend that.
Thank you, Dale. So we've got some things to chew on at the next meeting. Hopefully we'll have good availability on either the 9th or the 16th. And we'll move forward to that. It would also give people a little bit of time to, to add to their lists of questions that they have. And also, I think, to begin thinking how we want to communicate this going forward. If we have reservations, let's flag those. If we have things we really like, let's flag those as well. So with that.
Fred, can we get a copy of the presentation today?
I think it should be connected to the
recording.
email to the appointment that came out.
Okay.
If not, I'm sure Ben could send one along to you.
Okay.
Sometimes those don't go through. Sometimes it depends on your system.
Okay.
So with that, could I have a motion to adjourn from someone? Sam, second.
I'll second that.
Patty. So we stand adjourned. Thanks very much for tuning in.